All righty, we are live. Nickey, thank you so much for joining us.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
You are one of my favorite people who I do not hear from enough in the product leadership space because you are heads down doing a lot of very important work that a lot of us unfortunately can't see in the public at Duolingo. But I'm a big fan of what I do see, and you joined for a really fun session I hosted earlier this year around what PM candidates are doing to really impress companies these days. So beyond the hiring market, Marc and I just wanted to take some time and go deep with you on your thinking about the actual role of AI in evolving the product management space, and as a product leader at a very hot company right now that is becoming, well known as being an AI forward and AI first kind of company, the kinds of things you think about these days and where, what your impressions are. So maybe where we can start the conversation is, you mentioned that in addition to doing just like your regular quote unquote job, you also have to carve out very intentional time to stay on top of the latest evolutions with AI so that you can help your team incorporate that into like the way you build, the way you work. So maybe the first question I have for you is just like, what have you found to work well for you now in staying on top of it? Like what are your rituals? How do you try to make sense of it right now?
Yeah. So I think one of the most important things for me has just been making sure to carve out time to be following along. I think things are changing so fast right now, which is exciting. Like it's a really fun moment, I think, to be a builder. But I also think there's pressure, especially as a leader inside of an organization, to make sure that like you are paying attention to what's happening and that you can be guiding your team and helping your team understand what's happening because again, things are changing so fast. And so what I've been doing is really just making sure that I have a few different newsletters or podcasts that I'm listening to every week. And then I'm also just trying to carve out time in my actual workday to like make sure I'm paying attention to and reading up on what's happening. So some people I follow that I really like their content, Peter Yang, somebody we all know. I think he does a really good job of just like staying on the top of like what's happening. And he brings a lot of good change makers into his podcast. Also loved Lenny's newsletter, of course, just to kind of hear, especially like the big leaders that are coming out of some of the big, AI houses, just hear what they're thinking about. And then also just, surprisingly, I think it's maybe because it's my network is really good, is it just LinkedIn is another place where just checking in there, I'm sort of seeing like what's new and what's happening every single day. Also inside of Duolingo, we have a handful of folks who are, it's their job actually to be keeping everyone updated. And so I'm paying attention to that too, and making sure I've got my ear to the ground internally as well. But I think that's
is that like a newsletter that someone internally is curating,
Yep.
almost like here's the latest, here's what you should know.
Exactly. And then we also have a Slack channel where people are just posting when things are happening in the Slack channel. And that's sort of like organically, I think somebody just created it. And it's a good place to pay attention because as things are dropping, like they'll get posted in there pretty immediately. And so you can kind of keep an eye on that as well. But I was saying earlier that I think is very true is this has become like, I wouldn't quite call it a part-time job. Like it's not that many hours a week, but like several hours a week, probably I'm making sure that I'm just paying attention to what's going on. And the good news is I'm building for my job. And so some of that, I'm trying things. I'm doing it directly on the content that I'm working or like the subject that I'm working on inside of Duolingo. And then trying to carve out time to do some side projects, which is easier said than done when you work an operator schedule like mine, because I'm definitely busy, but I'm trying.
So it sounds like you're spending, like call it like 2 to 4 hours a week, give or take, on just keeping up with like the news, and that's either reading newsletters or podcasts or checking out your internal Slack. I'm curious, like as you're reading all this or consuming all these like media diet that you have for AI, like what are you looking for, and what are some signals that maybe like you're like, maybe I should take action here, or maybe this is a tool that's worth like playing with versus like I'm just going to keep it in the back of my head and I don't have to take action?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been, I would say, more focused on the products that are coming out of some of the big AI houses. Just this morning, somebody posted in our product management channel that they were playing with Sora. And so I was playing with Sora this morning. And it sounds cerebral. You're like, what's she creating? Very important things for Duolingo. I literally took a picture of my dog and I made a video of my dog that was funny. She's scared of squirrels, and it was a whole thing for my family. And so it doesn't have to be cerebral, honestly. Like you can have fun when you're doing some of these things too. And so I think walking that balance beam is important for my own sanity.
So
it also makes it fun too.
Totally.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're not immediately trying to connect, like the part of you that's just trying to stay in touch with the technology and stay on top of it doesn't feel like you have to immediately connect the dots to some use case at work or for something you're doing. It's just could be something personal. And then have there been any patterns in the kinds of those tinkering that led you to then have the bigger aha moment, which is like, okay, I need to, this is something we should incorporate into like either something we're building or how we work. Like what does it take for something to kind of graduate to that threshold?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing that was important for me is just like using ChatGPT regularly and using Claude regularly. I like both of those tools. I use them both pretty interchangeably, and just really teaching myself how to prompt well to make sure I can get good outputs. The product space I'm working on inside of Duolingo is Duolingo Math. And so a big part of the challenge that we have is we're actually using content, or basically models, to generate math content. And so being able to prompt really good and have good evaluators is such an important part of the work that myself and the team is doing, that to not be an expert on how to do that myself, like, would not have been helpful for anyone. And the good news, again, is you can do that in a straightforward way, which is just like playing with the tool, understanding the edges of how prompting really helps outputs, and then like passing along things that are really helpful so the team can see it too. And the good news is too, it's like, I'm trying to set an example that I'm learning all the time, but the team is doing the same thing too. And so that they're trying cool things and they're sharing. And so I think there's this like really awesome collaborative energy and ecosystem that we've created. So everyone's kind of learning from each other, and everyone's not scared to try things. I think especially with AI, like what you start creating typically is not good. It gets good over time. And so you got to create you have to create a culture where you're not wrong and you're not doing things that are bad. And just because you know that when the team is learning and practicing and doing it more, it's going to get better over time, and you can kind of bet on that.
Have there been any specific rituals? Sorry, Mark, I'm just curious. Like, Nickey mentioned like sharing with each other what you're all learning. Are there any specific rituals, like show and tells, or any specific things that you found to be most effective for kind of creating that internal sharing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just posting in Slack sounds dumb, but it's just it's an asynchronous moment. It's easy to share and update, and the team sees it, and then they can do the same thing, and then everyone's watching that. So that's a good ritual. We have demos every other week on Fridays, and it's meant to be, again, we have this concept of hot trash inside of Duolingo, where it's okay if it's not good. Like, especially with a demo or something like that, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're not saying we're going to ship this. We're saying like, hey, look at this thing I tried, or look what's new, and we're kind of playing with. And 50% of the time, like, you definitely would not want to ship that, or you couldn't ship it anytime soon. But then 50% of the time you're like, oh, I can totally see how that's going to get good soon. And we're going to be able to get that into the product experience and into people's hands. And I think that gives everybody energy, because then everyone sees what everyone else is doing. And then there's other things that I think are typically these are like more technically led, less product led, but just having good forums where people can kind of come, especially around generation, and just say, hey, here's what I've learned. I've created a generation pipeline. Here is what is working and what's not working. And then the team, other people can come get advice, see what's working and not working. And then that just kind of up levels what everyone's creating. And then that stuff gets shared back in Slack typically as well, so everybody sees it. So it's just kind of like trying things, experimenting, and then as much as possible sharing those things back with the team, so everybody's learning from each other.
Yeah. I'm curious to how has, maybe looking back, maybe like a year or 9 months from today, like, has the way your team builds product, all the way from like the discovery to shipping fundamentally change at all with these new tools?
Yes. Let's see. Yes, I think so, because we're building things in different ways now than we were before. And so not in every case, but we're using AI in a lot of ways to help us scale the things that we're working on. And so that is just really new. And it's also just gotten a lot better recently. And so we've definitely been doing that for like the past year, but I would say like in the last 6 months is really ramped up. And now we can actually ship stuff and feel good about it, which is important. In terms of like the core like product ritual, like I don't think it's changed a ton, at least in how we've been building, because we were sort of innovating already, and like that was already happening. And so we're still talking to users. We're still trying to move really fast. Duolingo has really great sort of product principles and company principles. One of the things we talk about a lot is clock speed and the green machine. Clock speed is just moving really quickly. And so like AI, I think, has helped us do that even more quickly, which is good. And then the green machine is just trying a bunch of little things, doing a ton of tests and iteration. And so we're, just incorporating AI into our process along those lines as well. And so I think like theoretically, like the day-to-day work is a little different, but like the way that we're building and what we care about like hasn't changed. Especially, Duolingo is in so many users' pockets all over the world. And so we're not going to ship things unless we think the quality meets a bar that we are proud of. And that is for sure has not changed, which is challenging with AI because especially when the models are still new and we're all still learning, like not everything you're going to build using AI is going to be able to be shipped at this stage. And so I think actually this is good advice for any product builders out there. Anyone who leads an organization is keep your product quality principles really high. A quality bar should stay high. It's important for teams. It'll actually push everyone to figure out how to use AI in ways where things can still ship. And I think quality can easily ship or slip if you're not careful. And so you really got to kind of keep a laser focus on it.
And as a product leader, where are you putting those checkpoints to make sure that the product quality doesn't go down? Is it like every step along the process, or is it mainly just like product review, like before you turn that flag on? Like where you, yeah.
Yeah, so we have I would say like a handful of different rituals that kind of all have a quality element. Our teams inside of math, we have these cross-functional meetings that happen every week where it's typically the team leaders or the team leads that come together, and quality is a big part of like when you're reviewing the team's product and what they're working on. And so just really pushing on that and making sure like everybody knows what good looks like, everyone's aligned on what good looks like, and everyone's sort of sprinting in that direction. And that's at the team level. And then you go up through Duolingo has this famous product review process. We should link to there's some good articles about this we could put in the show notes. But what this is basically like a ritual that we have that also puts a focus on quality. And so you're bringing in at different project stages and getting feedback from senior leaders at Duolingo. And that's another way that we keep quality really high. And that's a very streamlined, like we've got this down like to a T at this point. There's a ton of process around it. Sounds annoying, actually. I feel like when I tell people about Duolingo's product process, they're like, ugh. But what
Why?
it does, really, I think it's just this giant quality mechanism that helps the entire product organization know what quality looks like, because everyone's in the room together, they're looking at the same thing, and they're hearing leaders opine on if the quality is good enough. And if
So the reason that rubs people the wrong way, or that they might hear you talk about that and it sounds kind of like they have some kind of negative reaction to that, what do you think is underlying that reaction, that it feels what?
Honestly, I think like there is good process and there's bad process, and we've all been victims of bad process in our careers at different times. And so I think sometimes people hear about things like that and they're like, oh God, that's going to be bad. And you have to just make sure, especially if you're putting into place a ritual like that, that you need to like keep iterating on it, because it's not going to start good, but it needs to get good. And so I'm guessing that's where that comes from, is people are like, they're imagining that this is a poorly run thing, or it just creates a lot of extra hoops to jump through. And I actually think we've done a good job of like meeting the teams where they're at. And so we kind of like, we check in with them at the points of their product process where they need some advice and some feedback, and it's meant to be more focused on helping rather than blocking things. But I definitely think, I'm sure you all can remember some times where you've had bad process in jobs. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because in a way, like I work at companies and I know of companies that have like a very strict product review process.
Yeah.
And a lot of times because of that, kind of what you're trading off is the speed of execution, right? Because then it's like you're spending so much time doing work about work and polishing everything. So I'm curious. I mean, it sounds like yes, speed is very important at Duolingo, but also you have this serious product review process. So what do you think are how has Duolingo managed to keep this balance in a way that doesn't slow people down?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just been a ton of iteration on the ritual. And the ritual, when it started years ago, I think it's been around for like way longer than I've been at Duolingo. When it started, it's very different today because it's had to scale with the growing organization. And like, we have a lot more PMs than we did 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so I think that works. And then the other thing is I think everyone understands that clock speed is important. And so it's pretty quick. Teams only talk for like 5 minutes. Ideally, there's not a ton of upfront work that needs to happen because you've already made decisions and have images, have basically mocks or prototypes created. And so again, like that was kind of already our process, like even before AI. And so I think that helps it feel much more productive. And the other thing that I think I've seen it do, which this has been missing at other, and I've worked at Etsy, Airbnb, I worked at startups, like a lot of different, mostly consumer companies. This is the most effective ritual that I've seen. And I think that has helped at least it be much more palatable inside the company because everyone sees the value it adds. But the one thing that it does that I think is enormously helpful is it creates this like visibility mechanism where everyone understands like where the feedback that was given and then what good looks like. And that permeates like through your entire organization. And I think Duolingo's product quality is so high because of a ritual like this, especially as the org grows, like everybody going and kind of hearing and seeing what good looks like makes everybody better at building stuff.
What I'm hearing is that you've established, and you being the organization, which you're contributing to, but the organization has created a ritual. Tell me if I'm off here, but it sounds like it's a mechanism for scaling taste and like judgment across the org.
Totally. And I think it's especially helpful for like, you know, when you're a senior leader and you've been doing this for a long time, like your product sense and your product taste typically is like pretty well honed, right? But it's really great for junior, like APMs and PMs and folks who are early days building things. I always joke that I'm like, if you spend a few years like building product at Duolingo, your product sense is going to be 10x better than if you work at somewhere else. And I think this ritual is a big part of it. And I think it's also just like, we care a lot about quality. And so like somewhere else you'd get away with like crappy copy on a landing page or on an onboarding screen. Like that does not fly at Duolingo. And so I think that just helps level everybody up. And so everybody's product sense is just way better and their taste is very sharpened.
So I think I compare that with, you know, when people think of Airbnb, they obviously think of like a very design centric, user centric kind of company. But it sounds like maybe the rituals there didn't seem as effective as the rituals at Duolingo. So if someone is listening and they're like, I have a pretty good, you know, design culture at my company, but I don't have this kind of ritual Nickey's describing. What would be almost like the way to bootstrap the V1 version of a ritual like this at a company that wants to maybe start doing something like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think just having it's a meeting that's on people's calendars. And we have them at Duolingo every day. So basically you could grab time every single day. And it's like all the senior leaders in the product organization, including the CEO, is in that meeting every single day.
Like a 30-minute block on the calendar every day?
It depends on the day. So we have different formats. There's a mini version and there's a longer version, and you book different time depending on what you're building. There's a whole thing. Somebody needs to write about this. Surprised it's not out there. But what that does again is so it's easy for you to find time. Like you're never like, for the most part, you're not typically waiting to go into this ritual, which I've seen that not go well at other companies where you're like, shit, I can't get a spot for 2 weeks. Yeah. And so your team is waiting for 2 whole weeks. And like, again, if you think about
horrible. Yeah,
exactly. So again, when people are like, oh, they cringe, right? That's why, because they've been like, well, I couldn't ship anything for a month because I had to wait. And so like ours is not designed in that way. But I think it's a frequent meeting, and it has very clear guidelines of who signs up, the expectations of what they're bringing in the format of what they're bringing. And then who is in charge of giving feedback. If it's a free for all and there's 30 people in a room and everybody's giving feedback, like that is obviously not going to go well. So having clear people whose job it is to give feedback, and making sure that those people who are giving feedback are very calibrated with what good looks like. And I think just starting there, and you can even start in a casual way where it's like, we're going to try this for, a couple weeks. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to iterate on it. And just kind of committing to make it better. Because again, your first version is not going to be right to start.
What's the difference between this and what I might consider traditionally to be like a design crit, just like sitting in on a design crit? Is there a difference, or is it kind of similar?
It's similar, except this is all more functions come. So it's not just design. I'm pretty sure design crits still happen inside of Duolingo. I don't go to them personally because it's typically just design. And so like therein lies the problem when that's your only mechanism to give feedback, right? Is that you're missing people in that room. And so this is more cross collab. Like typically the people presenting are like the team lead. Well, it depends. It's like the people building the thing. And so it's usually like a PM and a designer for the most part. Sometimes an engineer is there too, depending on what it is. But that helps, again, just making sure that you have multiple different disciplines and it's like the whole team. It's more of like a team focused ritual. Got it.
Yeah. And the kind of thing that they might bring sorry, Mark, but I'm just like super curious about this. It's like, what makes for a good like topic to, if you show up today or tomorrow, well, I guess tomorrow's Saturday, but one of these reviews and you're like, wow, that was such a good one. Like what makes for a good one?
I mean, it's literally everything. Like in order to ship something, you're going to bring it through there. So it totally depends. But for example, my team is working on math, Duolingo math. And we're working on a new lesson type that is introducing math to people for the first time. And it's much more exploratory. So there's sort of like a fun element where you can kind of play and interpret the math. And so we needed to figure out, like, that's a hard problem to solve, right? If you think about math, there's thousands of math topics. We had to build a format that's going to scale across all those topics. So if you are being introduced to quadratics, or if you are being introduced to slope, or, name a math concept, linear algebra, there's some way where that lesson type scales so you can actually interact with the math in a compelling way. And so you can imagine that's a hard problem for anyone to solve, like any team to solve. And so that's something you would bring through at a couple different stages to be like, here's how we're thinking about this. Are we aligned that we want to do this and that this is a problem we want to solve? Thumbs up. Okay, move forward. You go back again. You're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's our recommendation on what we actually want to build. Get a thumbs up. Sometimes we'll bring things in a prototype format. That was an example where we brought a prototype so everyone could try it, which helps because then it's actually, you can interact with something that is designed to be interactive. It helps a lot. And so that you get really great, incredible feedback. And then you can implement that and it goes out into the app. So we're working on that now. It's not out yet, but soon, hopefully.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And is it up to the team to like decide what kind of feedback they're looking for? You're just like, hey, I'm in the design process. Here's what I have. Like, and how important is that, right? To like be good about like what you're asking feedback for.
I think it's always good to know like what you want feedback on, because then you can help guide the conversation. Typically, somebody who's good at building product will be like, we think this part is the tricky bit. Like, do we like our approach to this? Like, are we aligned? And so I think that helps a ton. But also just generally like the format of the meeting is designed to just give feedback on it anyway. And so that I would say you're going to get all kinds of different feedback from different people. And so you can guide it as much as you can, but you're just going to hear things about the experience regardless if you like it or not.
Yeah. And I have another kind of question here is like, how important is closing the loop with that group? And how does that happen? Because I feel like that's like one of like good product cultures too. They're really good at like not forcing people to close the loop, but at least like just like bringing it back with, hey, here's what we did based on this meeting and here's what we learned. And like basically like you have that collective context almost. And like, so how does that work for Duolingo?
Yeah. So we will say in that meeting, we'll say you have to bring this back or you're good. Go for it. And then we have a Slack channel for little things, because sometimes there's little follow-ups that like doesn't make sense to bring it back in that room. And so like those are looked at too. But for the most part, like you'll leave the meeting and you'll either know like this is approved or please come back with these changes. And again, like the rituals, like it's very positive. It sounds like it would be very pedantic and like overly harsh. It's really not. It's meant to be like we are all on the same team. We're trying to build cool, awesome stuff, and let's just make sure that we all understand the bar, and then we'll just keep bringing things back until we think they're ready.
I was gonna ask what have you learned about just from like being part of this culture and observing this ritual? What have you learned about what makes for the most helpful kind of feedback, or like if you're giving someone advice on how to deliver better feedback as a leader to the team that's presenting, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, I think just being really clear and being able to articulate like what type of feedback you have really quick is, we've designed this to be a pretty quick ritual. So you can't just like blab on and give a ton of feedback. Also, just like the most important things, I think giving feedback on the things that really are the blockers to shipping is really important, because obviously there's like endless improvements you can always make to things. So it's like finding the right, like what's the bar and making sure that the V1 is just on the right side of just past the bar, not too far past it, right? And so I think that's really important to make sure that you're giving really good feedback to teams just so they understand sort of like what they need to do next. Yeah.
I think for me, like when I've seen like the best product reviews is like when there's like a shared language for feedback and like how to categorize feedback. So for example, like at Asana, basically like product leaders that were giving feedback would have to like categorize feedback into like do, which is like, and then you have to do this, like just it's not even like a thing. Right. Consider, okay, like I think there's something here, like, my product intuition tells me like you should really just think about this. And then the other one's like, like it's like a hunch, try this, right? Like, and totally. Basically like depending on those things, you would have to come back or not. And that was really helpful, because then it's like, because before we had this shared language, you'd have like the CEO say something, you're like, oh shit, like does that mean that we have to do that now? Like it was just like kind of like there's just too much ambiguity, but like I think once you get to like that yeah, like precision is really
Totally.
helpful.
Or it's like, is it blocking feedback or not blocking feedback, right? And again, because again, like there's an endless quality level you could be trying to attain. And you don't want to do that because then you're going to waste everybody's time. And you don't even know if the thing works yet because you want to get it out. And so it's like, again, there's a bar and it's just like you want to be just past the bar to make sure that you're not, wasting people's time before you know if the thing that you're even building is going to do what you think it's going to do.
You mentioned,
you said,
sorry, go ahead, Mark. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just you mentioned that this ritual is like really helpful to like almost elevate the collective taste of Duolingo.
Yes.
Is that because a lot of people are shadowing the meeting, or is it because like one person will go in and kind of share what happened? Like how does that helping kind of like bring it to maybe like a junior engineer that's like not a team lead, but like who's working on that thing?
If you're enjoying this conversation, please check out the links in the show notes to support the podcast. Mark and I do this out of love, but to keep it going, we also need your support. Thanks, and now back to the episode.
Totally. So it is an open meeting. And so basically anyone in the company can join. And we tell people, even if they're not in product or design or engineering, to join it because it helps you calibrate on what good looks like. And I also think like, even if the quality bar should be everywhere inside of your organization. Like if you are writing a help article that's going to live on your help site, like thinking about quality there is as much as like the homepage or the landing experience that every single user will go through.
Totally.
It's the same. And I think a lot of times companies will like really, they'll be cheap with their time on certain places and they'll cut corners. And you can feel it when you use the product experience, right? It's like people see those things and they notice it. And so I think having a ritual like that is just a helpful way to scale taste across organizations. And then we always tell people, especially when people are new or they're ramping, like we have them spend a lot of time in PR because you'll learn just like the words that we use at Duolingo and just like you'll learn about leaders and like what they care about. And you'll also get a glimpse of like all the cool products and get ideas actually from other teams and what they're doing at Duolingo. So you have to be careful that you don't spend all your days inside of our product ritual for the most part. So we have people who are reviewing them every day. And it's definitely like a big chunk of their job is just like being in those meetings and like being on the hook to review a ton of work.
Yeah. I'm curious, you mentioned that this meeting is a long-standing meeting that predates your tenure at the company, right? So you've seen, I'm sure, lots of iterations of the meeting or how it's evolved over time. What you mentioned nowadays, the artifacts that get presented might be prototypes. That's probably one way that AI is kind of influencing or shifting the way that this meeting runs. But have there been any other kind of like material evolutions to the way that this meeting is conducted that have been influenced by AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI definitely changes it because you're bringing different kinds of products through that meeting too. So for example, we have a generative AI product that's called Video Call, right? And in Video Call, you are talking to one of our characters and you're practicing speaking your language. Well, you can imagine like static mock for that doesn't make sense anymore. And so like you need to build. And then you need to spend, as a reviewer or somebody giving feedback, you need to spend a bunch of time trying to find the edges of quality with that generative prototype. And so like that is definitely a change. In math, we're using AI to generate some math content to make sure that we can like scale across all of the thousands of math topics, right? We all of a sudden are like unlocking giant chunks of content at one time. And so you will also bring a build through that room, and then you'll have to figure out and make sure people have a time even outside of that room to spend with the content because it's a ton all at once. And so it's definitely like pushing on, I think, the boundaries of what we can do in like a 30-minute meeting every day. But I think we're pretty good at iterating on our rituals. And so I imagine that will continue to evolve over time. One of the things that I think is so important with AI that I feel really strongly about, and you can tell when people do not do this, other especially consumer products, is you literally, especially if it's any kind of generative AI, you need to spend a long time dogfooding and like a really short dogfooding cycle with your team on something that maybe could have many different edges and be used in many different ways, like is not enough. And I think like QA as a concept has really broken with AI. And I feel it when I use products where I'm like, oh my God, like clearly nobody looked at this. Like immediately I can break it. Or actually, I feel like this is going to be my new part-time job. Like send me your app and I will break it. Like I will do it. I will find the edges and I will get it to do things you don't want it to do. Trust me. And I think like, so that's important. So we do that a lot inside of Duolingo too. We do that on the math team is we have dog fooding sessions. We'll get together as a group. We also just have things in dog fooding builds. We'll put things in our path that are marked like dog food this. So people, when they're doing their daily lessons, will be doing it, in these specific places. And it helps a ton because it helps everybody see it. Lots of eyeballs, lots of different types of phones. People trying to break it really, really helps. And you, again, like you can always tell, I can tell when a consumer product goes to market and I'm like, ooh, clearly you were not spending enough time thinking about it. Yeah.
I'm curious. I mean, that's such a good point. And I definitely have used those products myself as well. And but it's such a hard problem because I feel like, as you said, like similar to, going to these meetings and getting feedback, there's always ways to get better. And so I'm curious, like, do you have any principles that you've developed around dog fooding when it's good enough? Because I think like, you can spend time, you can do 2 dog fooding sessions, but still like also the models are changing. So like, how do you think about like when it's, good enough?
Yeah. I mean, that's a hard one because I think it also depends on the product that you're building. And also not everything is fully generative, right? Like there's ways to use AI to help you create things that will be static once they live inside of your app. And like, that's much easier to dog food those types of things because you're generating things once, everyone can look at it, or even you can rely on user feedback if that's sort of your feedback mechanism. And then if things are good or bad, and then you can change it one time versus generative experiences where those are harder, where people can kind of use it many different ways. And even just like having your 10-person team try to dog food it, like it's not enough. And so I think like there's a fine line there to kind of strike the right balance, honestly. But I think generally that's also where taste comes into play. I think like one of the most important things that you can do, especially in the AI times as a builder, is like start to develop a really strong opinion of what good looks like. And then if you're a leader inside of an organization, like help your organization develop an opinion on what good looks like, and then make sure everybody understands what that looks like. Because I think, it's really easy to sort of like push on the boundaries with new AI experiences. And if your team is not aligned, you're going to feel that in your product experience, or you're going to ship something that's going to potentially be really punishing for your brand if you're not careful.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You go, Ben. No, you go, Ben.
No, I was going to say, because like I was talking to a founder recently who is building something that is going to have it's like 10 people using their product might have 10 different kind of user permutations of the user interface because they're using AI to dynamically evolve the experience in a way that's personalized. And so they were talking to me about how it's challenging to find people that can thrive in a design role, for example, or like a product person that can thrive, because the definition of good in a deterministic world, you can kind of bring static mocks to the table. Everyone agrees this is going to crush it. It's going to be great. But in a world where like the pieces, the UI elements and the UI components themselves are evolving in almost like a hard to predict non-deterministic way, I'm curious if you've learned anything about how to kind of like bring taste into, like, is there a different way to think about taste in that kind of non-deterministic world?
I think it's just what you're doing is you're converting your taste into evaluators. And so you need to sit down and write it out and be like, and you can have your team help with this. Is a great brainstorm where you get everyone in a room and you're like, okay, again, it's like aligning on what do we think quality looks like? What do we think this thing needs to do? What shouldn't it do? What does bad look like? What does good look like? And then it's breaking those into like a series of evaluators that we'll be looking at and guiding your experience to make sure that like it is helping deliver or say the right things. Honestly, it's passing through many filters that are trying to filter for many different things. And I think even if you do that well, it's still, because it's not deterministic, like still going to do weird stuff sometimes or hallucinate or whatever. I have this theory that like the general, like the culture or the people are going to get, they're going to get way better at like understanding when basically just like experiencing non-deterministic experiences and giving them more flex and understanding that it's AI. But we are not in that world yet. Like people will interact with something and they'll be like, that was bad, because they have no idea how it was built or what it's doing. And I think that's a really risky place for people building products, because when your end user doesn't understand, like they just suddenly will completely write your product off if you're not careful. And so I think it's like going through the motions again of like really thinking about what are we building? How do we actually make it simple? So maybe if it is non-deterministic, we're doing it in a very constrained way that like still is like sandboxed. so it's not going to do anything crazy or like hurt our brand. And I think that is something I don't see a lot of people really doing that today or doing it well. Maybe this is just a muscle that we all need to build collectively.
The specific thing, the muscle that you're referring to, is the ability to balance very opinionated constraint definition while doing
still having some open-endedness, right? Because again, if like, say you're building like, you know, you're personifying a character in a way that's going to help you do something or whatever, it does need to be creative, and it needs to feel like, you need to feel like it is personalized to like what you're talking about. So like, you can't constrain it too much, otherwise the whole thing doesn't work. But ideally you are constraining it enough where it's going to kind of like still stay on the path. There's a happy path with these things. And so it's like finding the right line to walk with it, and then making sure that you're like building it in a way that does that. And I do think like sometimes, you know, just fully keeping things open-ended, like that's also, you know, like ChatGPT wants to do that, right? Because they have so many users that are needing to do different things. And so you can imagine like the way they're going to build something is going to be very different than if you are like, I was trying a product called Tolons the other day where it's for kids. It's really cool characters that are like personified for kids. And you can imagine like their evaluators are going to be very different than someone like ChatGPT because the use cases are so different. The product that they're building is so different. And so just like really thinking about it that way and figuring out like, what are we trying to build? How do we bring this to life in a way where it's going to be safe and it's going to like help the user accomplish the thing that they need to do? But otherwise you're just, you know, you're risking just making your user mad right away, and then they're not going to use your product, which is not good for anyone.
Yeah. And I think the implicit point that you made too is that I think there's a lot of companies out there that actually do really impressive, kind of like they have really impressive products that are generative, but because they don't pay attention to that last mile, and maybe like the text like looks like there's some hints that, you know, this is very AI generated, even though the output is actually really good, it makes the user underwrite like all this amazing work that they've done. And then trust just kind of plummets, be like, oh, I don't want to use this product because they clearly don't care. And clearly
it's
like,
just slop.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the slop thing is real. Like it's, you know, it's hard to create really good product experiences that are not sloppy. And like your team needs to be like laser focused on making that happen. And I think things still slip through. And again, because this like larger consumer base has not been taught or doesn't understand what's happening with their tech that they're using, like they are very punishing, as they should be, honestly. Like, and I imagine like, you know, especially as like younger people are becoming more AI native and are learning this when they're younger and using it even in schools now, like in 10 years, that might not be a problem anymore. I think like people will probably be a little bit more fluent. But today you're in this like risky place where you have to be really careful because people don't understand what's happening. Another thing that drives me a little crazy is when people just like slap AI onto their marketing and they're like AI, blah, blah, blah. And like your end user doesn't care. They just want your product. They don't. They just want your product to do the thing that you're telling them to do or that you're saying that it's going to do. And you putting AI on it for no reason, like maybe even is hurting what you're trying to do. You know, especially like in specific use cases, like that does not make sense. Not everybody's techie. Not everybody is going to care about AI, or actually some people actively don't like it. And so you have to be really thoughtful about like how you're talking about what you're building too, because that doesn't help in all cases for you to like slap that into your marketing. And it is everywhere now. Like I was in, I went through LaGuardia Airport last week and there was like 6 ads. Like when I was on my little, like I was on the walking, that was like AI for
it's
this.
Crazy.
And I'm like, nobody cares. Nobody cares. And so if you're a marketer, if you're a product marketer, tread carefully.
But it's funny, like what you just described. Sorry,
go ahead. No, what was coming to mind is like the Salesforce like cloud thing, like where it's like internet server.
Yeah.
I forget what their anti-positioning was, but if someone can come out with a
on-prem
AI powered product that like literally is like taking on an anti-AI positioning play, that's probably one way to stick out in the
totally. I think that's very true. And again, I think that there's that sentiment because people are shipping really sloppy experiences and they're not using AI responsibly. And so consumers are mad about it. And I think they deserve to be mad. And so I think that that's just going to push people who are building, like they're just going to make people build better and build more intuitive, thoughtful product experiences. But we're in that like weird gray zone time now where it's just like, we're not there yet. And so that's going to be interesting in like the next 10 years, because I think builders will get smarter And then consumers will just understand what's happening with AI a little bit more. And ideally, there's some nice moment where all that comes together someday, but we're not there yet.
And I'm sure those companies that maybe have like a lower bar, and what you're describing is also happening like at a meta level in the way they build product. Like, for example, they are allowing some of that slop, let's say when people are writing PRDs or, when they're creating prototypes, right? Like in surface, it looks good and sexy, but then you look at the copy, I was like, hey, this copy is trash. Like, and that's part of the product. So I think like everything kind of permeates, and how you do the small things probably translating to how you do the big things and the end result, which is the product.
Yeah. And that's, again, where like we keep coming back to taste, because I do think one of the things that is really important in any kind of, this can be a startup, even when you are, working on your podcast, like when you're writing your show notes, like that is a moment where you are going to, write things in a way to make sure that they are quality, that it makes sense. Like all of those things really matter. And I think if you are leading an organization, again, it's like showing your team and helping them build their own taste. So when they're doing little things or big things, like they're all done in a way that's like aligned with sort of what you're trying to do. And I think a lot of people are sloppy, is that they'll use the AI to like write the landing page copy. And then you read it and you like are actually thinking critically about it. And you're like, that doesn't make any sense, or that doesn't sound good. Like a person wouldn't write it that way. And so just being able to catch that stuff is going to be important, especially if you're a leader, because especially in late stage capitalism, right? Everyone's busy. We're all shipping a ton of stuff. It's really easy to use AI. It's easy to like lean back on that and be like, I'll have AI do it. But that's not always the right thing to do, because it doesn't always ensure that you're going to ship something that's really high quality.
Where are you landing as far as like things people can do to hone or improve their taste? Like, so we talked about this ritual internally, but is there anything else that you would tell someone who's like, I want to get better at having better taste? Like anything that you find yourself repeating to people?
So I always joke that this is my future Maven course, because I think that this is something that there's not a lot of good resources out there that are doing this today, because it's hard. It's also highly contextualized depending on what you're working on, right? Like you can imagine the taste of shipping something, like say you work on Slack, for example, like you're going to have a very different set of product principles than working on a consumer product like Duolingo. And I think that like one way to train yourself is just to use a lot of products and to think critically and ask yourself, what is good about this? What is not good about this? I do this a lot. I actually do this with my kids. So you can start, if you have kids, I think you can start making your kids think critically when you're just out in the world and they'll be like, I like this song. Why do you like that song? What's good about that song? Tell me more. Or you take them to a movie and you say, like, what did you like about that? Oh yeah, what was your favorite part? Why was it your favorite part? It's the same thing with building products. Like it's not that hard, especially consumer products. Literally, it's like, how do you build the most simple, intuitive thing, and really looking at an experience? Like you could download any app in the App Store and do your own product critique on it and be like, okay, this is for elders who need help with their passwords. How might somebody who is older navigate using this experience? What would be hard? What's easy? What is this design doing? Is it helping? Is it hurting? Like just kind of like thinking critically about things, like honestly goes a really long way. One simple thing for taste building, I think, is just using a bunch of different products. And a lot of product builders do this. They do this already because they're kind of techie. And so they're just trying things. Like that is just a great way to see how different people are doing different things. And it makes a huge difference. And it's just a really effective tool. So start there. And I think that really helps. And then just listening to all the good podcasts and all of the content about what good looks like will just help you kind of sharpen your own taste over time.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like part of it is what you said, right? Of like that discipline and exercise of just always try to ask, why do I like that? What I don't like, why I don't like that. The other half though, like when I think about like, the persona of like my favorite designer that I'm like, ooh, like they have really good taste. Like everything that they do is just beautiful. It almost sounds like they surround themselves in like a beautiful world. I go to their houses and like everything's like super clean and beautiful. So and I kind of get the same vibe with you right now. I'm like, I look at your back and I'm like, man, like, so what do you have to say there about like, kind of like,
yeah,
no, about like, what is your advice for like having people immerse themselves in like either physically or virtually in like a beautiful aesthetic world that can also help you bring your standards up?
Yeah. I mean, I think I really think taste is just critical thinking at the end of the day. And it's like training your own critical thinking. Like the same way you build an app experience is the same way you could design a room if you want to think about it that way. What do I care about in this room? What does it need to do? What's its function? Like, how might I bring this to life in a way that like helps me achieve whatever that goal is? And then just really thinking about how you do that with every decision and choice that you make. And I think there are probably people who have incredible taste that maybe don't have an incredible background, right? Because they don't care. Like, it's not, I would say it doesn't cascade everywhere. But I think, like, again, it's just sort of like really choosing yourself to think critically when you're like creating an experience. And you can do this in so many different places too. It's like, if you're going to host Thanksgiving, ask yourself, like, actually set an intention. How do you want people to feel when they're at your Thanksgiving experience? Like, how do you bring that to life? What do you serve? You know what I mean? How much wine do you buy? Things like that.
Yeah, how full do you want people to feel when they leave, right? Like
Totally.
it's like these kind of questions. And I agree. I think a lot of people, like, it's kind of easy to say what you hate about a product, or that this sucks, or this is frustrating, or it's so slow, blah blah blah. It's easy to complain. I think it's a little less easy to pinpoint specifically what bothers you about it. And that's a good skill to develop, is to say this is too slow, or when I click this, it's not fast enough, or it takes me somewhere that I'm confused about, or whatever. But I think to me, like a real leveling up is to be able to pinpoint the specific reason something feels good. Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned, like, what do you love about that song? But even though it's great advice, I think a lot of people don't develop that. It's almost like we're wired to fixate on the things that are not working versus the things that are working.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit of a harder muscle. Like, when I find myself just not complaining, I've tried to nowadays like catch myself in that moment and being like, why is this why is nothing bothering me right now? What's working about this? Right? It's kind of a way of trying to be mindful, I guess. But
yeah, it's just being present in your environment. The other thing that I think really helps is, and this is something that definitely, like, you are for the most part like a builder to have access to something like this, but if you're going to put out anything in the world, do user research. Watch 50 people use your product experience. And that's another way to build a taste, because you're like, oh crap. And you'll be surprised. Like, even senior people like will not catch a thing. And then you send it through a bunch of like 50 kids see it or something. And you're like, crap, like that didn't work at all. And I think like when you do that 100 times, you get really good at reading like how things are going to kind of like live with different audiences and different groups. That's one of the things that I think has been so fun working at Duolingo. When I joined, so I've been there for like 4.5 years. And when I joined 4.5 years ago, I didn't join because I was like, I'm going to level up my product sense. I was just like, really fun consumer app. People seem cool. Let's do it. And what I realized is like Duolingo's in so many million, it's in so many pockets of people all around the world. Like, I see people using Duolingo when I'm out and about regularly. And watching different people use the product experience has really sharpened my product taste, my product sense, my ability to create good experiences, because there's just so many people that that needs to work for. Like, my grandma uses Duolingo and my 6-year-old daughter does, and it needs to work for both of them. And so like, I think, yeah. And so I think that's where, you know, even with, like, if we think about AI, like with consumers, like you need to build things that are going to work for, you know, not every product is overly tailored on, like, it's not going to be like either hyper tailored or work for everyone. But just, again, being really careful about when you're building experiences, really making sure the person that you're building for is like going to be able to use it, has the right context or knowledge to understand the nuance around it. And I think that's where AI continues to get itself into trouble. Or I see things with just like, you know, of kids using it and then they these weird things happen. And it's like, well, yeah, if you think a kid is going to use your product, like, you should make sure that you have those edge cases like figured out. And I think just like not enough of that is happening right now. And so I'm hoping, again, like, I think it will happen in the next 5 years or so. I think it's still so early, but there's a lot of work to be done to get there.
Yeah. I mean, I think taste is like a big, like, I think taste kind of has made like a big comeback. I mean, it's always been like super critical for product, but like with AI, I feel like it's like, oh, like now it's like what differentiates like the normal people to the 10x like product builders. I feel the other one that's like big, which in a way is like a different flavor of taste, is like kind of strategy or judgment. And for example, like I was thinking like, wow, for Duolingo, like you could do so many, like now with AI, you could do so many things, right? Like you could literally just like someone could sign up into your app, and you could literally ask them, hey, like, what do you want to learn? And you could generate like different lessons, and you could ask them, hey, like, how do you prefer to learn? Do you like to be like tutored? Do you like to lecture plus then questions? Do you just like to read stuff? So yeah, like how I don't know, it just sounds like a fascinating time to be building product and to have a strategy. So yeah, I don't know if the way you think about product strategy has changed at all with like with this new technology.
Yeah, I mean, I think because you have new tools now, it's just like your end product is just going to change based on the tools that you're using. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see. Like, I think this is just for all, especially consumer experiences. I think it's going to be really fascinating again to see where we're at in like 10 years and to see like how things have evolved as true consumers, everybody crossing the chasm, if you will, right? As more and more people adopt and like become more familiar with new ways of building or using those products. Like, I think it's just going to be really interesting to see how it changes, like how you're building things and what your product strategy looks like. But I think the TLDR is that it has definitely changed the product strategy. Like the way, especially in Duolingo math specifically, AI has been so helpful because it was just going to take us a really, really long time to create math content for technically thousands of topics for math. And so now that we can do that and we've proven that we can do that, you can imagine that drastically changes our product strategy. And so I think like this is going to be really helpful to lots of different types of experiences because it just like opened doors that were maybe closed before because you just never would have been able to build it. And so I think it's still like early days and we're still figuring out, both at Duolingo and I'm sure in many other companies, like how do you change how you're working and how do you also just like tweak the product experience in different ways? But I definitely think like you're probably doing it wrong today if you have not iterated on your process based on all of the advancements that are happening in AI in like especially like the last year and a half. It's like a totally different landscape, which is also fun. I read this book recently about basically it's about motivating people. And one of the things that demotivates people, and I think this happens like later stage career for a lot of people because you've been doing the job for like I've been in product roles now for like over 15 years, which wow, it's like makes me feel very old. Didn't say that out loud. But one of the things that is a pillar of motivation is your mastery of like what you're working on. And one of the things, and this is where I think there's been such an explosion of AI content on LinkedIn, is that it's like fun for people to build again because they were sick of doing it the way that they were doing it before. I'm surprised nobody has written about this yet, but like it's so different and it's changed how you're working. So everyone has to relearn and try things a different way. And I think that's just very energizing for a lot of people because they actually get to like try something new, do it in a different way.
It's such a good point. It's such a good point that like, because I guess ChatGPT came out
2024?
Three?
Yeah, 2023? I should know.
Yeah, I think like towards the end of 2023. Like
okay,
it's like H2 2023. I think that feels right.
That's right. That's right. Because I remember. Yeah. I started at
November 30th, 2022. Just looked it up.
Okay, 2022. Whoa. Wow. Okay, so we're 3 years. We're coming up into year 4, I guess, with all this stuff. But I think the point you're making is so good because I do remember, call it end of 2021, early 2022. People forget the vibe in tech. And it was like not just market, like the IPO market's shutting down, ZERP coming to an end, but also on a personal.
Everybody's getting like laid off. That was like yeah.
Totally. But to your point, from even if those were not enough to make it a bad time, everyone was basically in the hyper mature phase of SaaS and like of traditional software development. Yep. And to your point, like now it's a new boom wave. There's almost like this reinfusion of energy and vigor that's making people excited again to work and build in tech. And I think everyone's feeling a simultaneous, at least everyone I talk to is feeling a simultaneous, oh my God, this is the most exciting time ever. And simultaneously feeling I can't keep up with all of it. It's exhausting. How am I supposed to like do so I'm curious, like if you've developed any, I don't know, like any heuristics for almost like when you're in too deep on something or you're like need to pull back, and because you're obviously a very naturally curious person, and this is kind of a challenging time to be a naturally curious person because it's all interesting. It's like how are you determining maybe like any heuristics on where to hold yourself back?
I feel like I'm not doing this well, to be honest. Like, I think I definitely fall down a rabbit hole and I'm interested in like needed to read all the books about all the things. Like that's like my sort of toxic personality trait, which makes me just like, I'm just like a curious person. So I think again, like I'm just like, I need to know all the things and read all the things. So I should probably be touching grass more, to be honest. But you guys figure that out. Tell me. I'm the last person to be giving advice on that. I will say I'm a big believer in just making sure you have hobbies and you make time for those hobbies. That sounds dumb. Really, it does. I personally love to read. I read tons of fiction. I read at least a book a week. Like I'm one of the most well-read people you will know. And I make sure that I make time for that. And it's not all like books about AI, although I read those too occasionally. I'm actually on the book 5 of the Thursday Murder Club series right now, which is about some geriatric crime solvers in the UK. And it's really cute. So if anyone needs a very delightful read, they literally they're in like a nursing home and they solve murders. It's very funny. You should read it. But yeah, I think like making sure that you're not spending all your time reading about AI, like, whoa, especially as a builder, I think like some of the best builders that I know are people who are really well read on like non-AI things, like on fiction, or they go to the museums all the time, or they travel all the time. And so I think you have to remember that taste is more than just like you watching user research. It's also you in the world experiencing things, being a part of culture. And I think that's going to be more and more important. And I also think AI in some ways is going to push us to more of those experiences because, you know, you spend more and more time on your phone. And I think people are going to crave more of the in-person interaction. I think you'll probably see a wave of products that focus on that stuff again. I think that kind of happened in the like mid 2010s. There was a lot of that, like come together, we're going to do things IRL. And then it kind of fell away. And I think it'll come back as like more and more people are spending more and more time on their phone, which I'm all for. I'm all for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily bad to go really deep into a rabbit hole. Like I actually think if you have the ability to do that, like it can be a superpower, right? Because like I think you like, especially if you're curious. But I do think like, so I don't know if it's like you have to hold back from going down into a rabbit hole. I think that what you have to do is like take breaks and get perspective so then you can go and apply it into whatever field or situation you're in. But yeah, I do think that like being curious is such a superpower that I think a lot of us in product take for granted. But I think you got to listen to that. And there's just probably more good than bad there. I think as long as you're taking action.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Is like what's been most exciting to me about tinkering, because I'm in the bucket of like growing list of things I want to play with and tinker with, and not enough time, even without a full-time job, just enough things going on in life. That what I find helps me is to have is if I can bring a lens of what I'm trying to do. For example, like having this podcast. If I see something, if something crosses my radar, that's like, oh, this could maybe help us solve a problem for the podcast. It adds like some escape velocity to that thing that gets it to the top of the list to tinker with. Yeah. And then things that just like don't seem to have any immediate applicability to anything I'm actually like already interested in doing seem to kind of fall down in that list. Seems to be at least how my cataloging stack ranking works. But I'm guessing everyone has some flavor of that going. It's like the stuff that does seem relevant probably pops to the top of the list.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we could keep talking about this for a long time. I want to be mindful. I know we all have some stuff we got to get done before the weekend. So is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you think is top of mind or interesting that, you know, you want someone taking away from the conversation when it comes to like how to just improve the way that they build right now, especially in the consumer side?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just like, again, having your own sense of self-judgment when you're building things and in thinking about your own taste and like how you invest in it. Because I think that's what's just going to be important in the next, X years for builders specifically. And I think like there are so many ways to invest in just developing your own sense, your product sense and your taste that is just going to make you a little bit better than other people that are also tinkering and building. And so I think maybe that's my takeaway is like, that's not wasted time. Like that is only going to help you as you're kind of shipping things. And so, invest in yourself and your own taste because it'll take you further.
Have you found any, because I think something that I think product people we're bad at is like just prioritizing these things that don't have like immediate kind of like value or that you're going to get something out of it or that moves the needle or an outcome. These things are like a little bit more nebulous. So like, have you seen any good ways that maybe that people have used to hold each other accountable to develop tastes together or any exercises that you're like, maybe you should get a group of friends and do this? Like, yeah, any ideas there?
Yeah. I mean, I think like Ben was just saying this, but it's like find the things that are like like borderline interesting to you. Like, I think if you're like, I'm going to have to spend a bunch of time doing this and it's on things that aren't interesting or don't like fulfill me in some way, like it's not going to happen. And so like figuring out what those things look like maybe you do like using other products and you think it's really fun and you like to try things. So you're carving out time to try things a couple times a week and just like taking notes, or it's just reading. Like, I think I need to read more fiction, or science fiction is really relevant right now because like we are living in the sci-fi times all of a sudden. And so maybe that's really fun for you. And so that's how you're doing it. Or it's maybe just like, taking some courses on design in Figma. Like even learning how to use Figma and forcing yourself to design UI is really impactful. We just put our whole product team through Figma training at Duolingo because just helping you actually create your ideas is going to even help when you're using generative AI to create prototypes and things like that. And so like you could do that. So I would say like figure out what's interesting to you and like lean into the places where you can like work on your taste that is interest adjacent, because I think it just means you're going to actually stick to it. But otherwise, future Maven course someday, maybe by Nickey. No promises, but
we'll talk about it. Talk about it.
Yeah, I would sign up right now.
Okay, all right. I'm counting on it.
And I would say if anyone's listening, you want a sci-fi recommendation just because it's come up, I would recommend Hyperion. Amazing book. Lots of AI stuff ahead of its time, and it's just a great story. So if someone's just looking for an entry point into sci-fi, go check out Hyperion. Have you read it, Nickey?
I have not, but I will add it to my list.
It's amazing.
We'll add it to the show notes.
Add it to the show notes. Dan Simmons, excellent author. So in closing, if someone's listening and they want to learn more about what you're thinking about, if they resonated with some of the stuff we talked about, where can they go to follow you and learn more from you or hear more from you? And then 2, how can they be helpful to you?
Yeah. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I would say I post most frequently there, and it's like linkedin.com/Nickey Skarstad. And then I also have a Substack, which I am terrible at writing on, but I occasionally, when I need to bust something out, I will. And it's nickey.substack.com. And then how can you help me? Ooh, that's a good one. Send me book recommendations always. Actually, more. I feel like I need more sci-fi in my life. I read a lot of I just feel like I read whatever's like interesting in my mind any given day. But also any Substacks or really good novel content like that is really interesting, that is kind of probing at the edges of this time we're living in, is also really fun for me. And so if anyone has any recommendations there, I'd love to hear them.
Cool.
Amazing.
I got you on the sci-fi book recommendations, and I'll hook it up with you after this. Okay. All right. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us. This was great.
You got it.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, everyone.